All right, welcome back everyone to the deck dive. For today's deep dive, we're really focusing in on, well, a pretty fascinating new release from a watchmaker that I know we both have a lot of respect for.
Yeah.
So it's the new Patek Philippe Calatrava reference 6196P, and it's not just any other watch. It's kind of the latest in a really legendary line, and we've got I've got all the information here that you sent over to me, and our goal today is to really kind of go beyond just like the basic specs and stuff. We want to really understand why this watch is significant,
Yeah.
for those of us who really, really follow this world.
Absolutely. I mean, the Calatrava. I mean, talk about an iconic watch. I mean, ever since they introduced the reference 96 back in 1932,
Yeah.
I mean, that watch has been considered the paragon of an elegant dress watch.
Right.
And this new 6196P, it's being hailed as the true successor to the long discontinued 51196, even sharing the 96 in its name.
Yeah.
To honor its ancestors. So right away, right off the bat, we're talking about a watch with real heritage, real pedigree.
Yeah, no, it's pretty incredible. And what's interesting is that they did discontinue the 5196.
Right.
But it was a really popular model. So I think it's interesting that they decided to bring back, something so closely connected to it.
Well, I think it speaks to maybe a renewed appreciation for that classic Calatrava aesthetic.
Right.
That kind of timeless elegance that never really goes out of style.
Right, exactly. So let's kind of dive into the specific watch.
Okay.
So the case, it's 38 millimeters, which I think is a really great size for a dress watch these days. I mean, I know a lot of people out there love their 40 millimeter plus watches, but for a dress watch, it's got to be a little bit more refined,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it needs to kind of slip under the cuff effortlessly.
Exactly.
You don't want it kind of bulging out or feeling too big or bulky on the wrist.
Right.
And I think 38 millimeters, that's a great sweet spot. It's large enough to have a presence on the wrist, but it's still very elegant and refined.
Right. And what's amazing is how thin this watch is. It's only 9.33 millimeters thick, which is really quite incredible, especially considering all the mechanics that are packed in there. We'll talk about the movement a little bit later, but that's pretty remarkable,
It is, yeah. They've managed to pack a lot of horological firepower into a very slim profile.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that I always love about the Calatrava is that classic 3-part case construction that they use.
Right.
I mean, it's so recognizable. It's just so clean,
Absolutely. It's you have that bezel, you have that middle section, you have the case back, and it all comes together so seamlessly. It's a design that's really stood the test of time. I mean, it's as relevant today as it was, back in the 1930s.
Right. And one of the things that I think really kind of makes it is the finishing on this case.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just exquisite.
It is.
You have the polished surfaces, the satin brushed flanks, and then that lovely bevel on the bezel.
Yeah.
And those really kind of elegantly tapered lug. I mean, all that together, it just creates this really refined look.
It does. It gives the watch a sense of both precision and kind of like handcrafted artistry.
Yeah.
It's not just a machine-made object. It's something that's been very carefully, very meticulously finished by hand.
Right. And then there's this one detail that I think is really interesting.
Okay.
They've included a single diamond set into the case band at 6 o'clock.
Yes.
Which is not something you typically see on a Calatrava, right?
So what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's a very interesting touch. It's very subtle.
Yeah.
It's not ostentatious.
Right.
It's not trying to be flashy, but it's just a little something extra.
Yeah.
A little touch of luxury.
Yeah, it's almost like a secret,
It is, yeah. It's like a little secret that only the wearer knows about.
Right.
but it adds a certain something to the watch.
Yeah, I agree. So let's talk about the dial.
Okay.
It's described as rose-gilt opaline, which a lot of people are just calling salmon.
Right, salmon-pink.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a fair description.
Yeah.
And it really does have this kind of warm, vintage look to it.
It does, yeah. It's a color that has a lot of history in watchmaking.
Yeah. You see it on a lot of vintage watches,
Yeah.
and it's a color that really kind of evokes a sense of warmth and nostalgia.
Right.
And I think it's a great choice for this watch because it really kind of complements the overall kind of classic aesthetic.
Right, right. And the layout of the dial is very traditional as well.
Yeah.
You have the small seconds sub-dial at 6 o'clock.
Right.
Which is very much in line with that kind of classic dress watch aesthetic.
Absolutely. It's a very clean, very uncluttered dial.
Yeah.
And it's all about legibility.
Right.
Being able to tell the time at a glance.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But there are some elements here that feel a little bit more modern.
Okay.
For example, the hour markers.
Yeah.
They're applied white gold.
Right.
And they're what they call obus style, which is a very traditional style.
Okay.
But they're finished with this dark anthracite color. And that's something that you don't typically see on a Calatrava.
Right.
And I think that really gives it a little bit of a contemporary twist.
It does. I mean, that dark anthracite color, it really kind of pops against the salmon dial.
Yeah.
And it creates a very nice contrast.
Yeah.
It's very legible.
Yeah.
And it's just a very, very nice touch.
Right. And the hands are also anthracite white gold.
Yes.
And they're Dauphine style, which again, very classic.
Right.
But that anthracite finish, I think it ties everything together really nicely.
It does. Yeah. It's a very cohesive look.
Yeah. So let's talk about the movement.
Okay.
So this watch is powered by the new caliber 3255 PS,
Yes.
which is a manual winding movement.
Yes.
And this is a significant upgrade from the 215 PS that was used in the 5196.
It is.
So tell me a little bit about this new movement. What are the key benefits here?
Well, first of all, it's a larger movement,
Right.
which generally speaking means that it's going to be more stable,
Right.
and potentially more accurate.
Okay.
But more importantly, it has two mainspring barrels,
Okay.
whereas the 215 PS only had one.
Got it.
And that means that this watch has a power reserve of 65 hours,
Wow.
which is a big increase from the 44 hours of the 215 PS.
Yeah, that is a huge difference.
It is.
I mean, that's almost an extra day. Yeah.
It is, yeah. I mean, you could take this watch off on Friday night
Yeah.
and put it back on Monday morning,
Yeah.
and it would still be running.
Right.
Which is a very practical benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also has a stop seconds mechanism, which is something that you don't always see on a manual winding movement.
Right.
But it's a very nice feature to have because it allows you to set the time more precisely.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things that you don't really realize how much you appreciate it until you have it.
Right.
Being able to stop the second's hand and synchronize the watch to an exact time signal.
Yeah.
It's a very nice feature.
Yeah. It's definitely nice addition.
Absolutely.
So, this movement, the 3255 PS, this actually wasn't developed specifically for this watch.
Right.
This actually debuted in the larger 39 millimeter Calatrava 6119 back in 2021.
Right.
So what does that tell you about Patek Philippe's approach to movement development?
Well, I think it shows that they're really committed to innovation.
Yeah.
And they're not afraid to kind of use their latest and greatest movements across different models.
Right.
They're not just reserving their top of the line movements for their most expensive watches.
Right.
They're willing to kind of share the wealth, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing for consumers.
Right. And what's amazing is that even though this movement is larger than the 215 PS and it has these additional features,
Yeah.
it's still incredibly thin.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
It's only 2.55 millimeters thick, which is the same thickness as the 215 PS.
Wow.
So they've really managed to pack a lot into a very small space.
Yeah. And that's critical for maintaining that kind of slim, elegant profile of the watch.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want a dress watch to be too thick.
Right.
It needs to kind of sit comfortably under the cuff.
Right.
And this movement allows them to do that.
Right. And of course, being a Patek Philippe, the finishing on this movement is just exquisite.
Yeah.
I mean, they really go all out, even on the parts that you can't even see.
Absolutely. I mean, it's all about attention to detail.
Yeah.
It's about making sure that every single component is finished to the highest possible standard.
Right.
And you can really see that when you look at the movement through the sapphire crystal case back.
Yeah.
I mean, the bridges are beautifully finished.
Yeah.
The screws are polished.
Yeah.
It's just a work of art.
Right. Right. So let's talk about the strap.
Okay.
So this watch comes on a shiny chocolate brown alligator leather strap,
Right.
which is, a very classic choice for a desk watch.
It is, yeah. I mean, you can't really go wrong with alligator leather.
Right.
It's luxurious.
Yeah.
It's comfortable.
Yeah.
And it just looks great.
Right. And the color, the chocolate brown, I think that complements the platinum case and the rose gold dial really nicely.
It does, yeah. It's a very warm, very inviting color.
Yeah.
And it's a nice contrast to the coolness of the platinum.
Right, right. And the buckle is a platinum prong buckle.
Yes.
Which is, again, a very classic choice. And it keeps everything very consistent,
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about harmony.
Yeah.
Making sure that all the elements of the watch work together seamlessly.
Right, right. So we've talked about all the different elements of this watch, the case, the dial, the movement, the strap.
Yeah.
What's your overall impression?
Well, I think it's a really beautiful watch.
Yeah.
I think it's a very worthy successor to the 5196.
Yeah.
And I think it's a watch that's going to appeal to a lot of collectors.
Yeah.
It's got that classic Calatrava aesthetic.
Yeah.
But it's been updated in a very subtle, very tasteful way.
Yeah.
And I think it's a watch that's going to be just as relevant, 20 years from now as it is today.
Right. And I think it's really interesting how they've managed to kind of blend that vintage aesthetic with some more modern touches.
Yeah.
Like that diamond on the case, for example.
Right.
Or the dark anthracite finish on the hands and the indices. I think it's a really nice balance.
It is. It's a watch that's both classic and contemporary at the same time.
Yeah, I agree. So for anyone who's thinking about adding this watch to their collection,
Okay.
the retail price is 40,000 Swiss francs.
Right.
And the reference number is 6196P.
6196P.
So there you have it.
Yeah.
That's the Patek Philippe Calatrava 6196P.
A very special watch.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So before we wrap things up,
Okay.
we've talked a lot about this specific watch.
Yeah.
But I think it's also interesting to kind of think about the bigger picture here.
Okay.
What does this watch tell us about the future of iconic designs?
That's a great question.
Yeah. How do you balance that respect for tradition
Right.
with the need to innovate?
Yeah.
How do you update a classic design without losing its essence?
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
You don't want to change things too much
Right.
because you risk alienating the people who love the original design.
Right.
But at the same time, you don't want to just stagnate.
Right.
You need to keep things fresh.
Yeah.
You need to appeal to a new generation of consumers.
Right.
So it's a tough challenge.
Yeah, it is.
But I think Patek Philippe has done a really good job with this watch.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. So I think that's something for all of us to kind of think about, as we consider the future of design in general.
Absolutely.
But for now,
Yeah.
that's going to do it for this episode of The Deep Dive.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.